Hello, Tracy here. I've been working with the Freckled Fawn Mixed Media Kit for the past little while, and if you're watching my channel, you've seen me post quite a few different scrapbooking projects using the kit, but one thing I haven't done yet is an art journal page. So today I decided to jump into my art journal. I'm working today in my Canson Mixed Media Journal, which is 9 by 12 inches. And I'm just heading over to my mixed media area to pick out some things that I can collage on a background to get started with a base. So I'm working in my media album, which is a art journal that's all about the influence of media on my life. So it's about music and film and television and that sort of thing. And so I'm just looking through the Arbonne catalog actually, because I love the Arbonne catalog for art journal. It makes really great collage pieces because the font is really beautiful in it. It's like a very beautiful typographic font, and it's the same all the way through. And it just has beautiful photography and beautiful typography as well. So I'm going to just grab a couple of pieces, and I do like to repeat my patterns on both sides of the page and just in a couple of different places. So rather than just putting that page all in one chunk over on the right hand side, I decided to tear a couple of little pieces and put them up in the top left hand side as well. So now I'm just grabbing the Freckled Fawn Mixed Media Kit, and it comes with this beautiful tissue paper that I've been using all weekend, and so I only have so much of it left. I have a large chunk of it and a smaller chunk of it, so I will spread that across my page as well. And I went to get my beautiful Hydrus P.H. Martin's, they're fine art watercolor, and these are intensely pigmented. I can't even tell you how pigmented they are. You just have to play with them to really believe just how much color you get in one tiny little drop. So I think I put 3 drops in there of the green. Let me tell you the color. It is 6H Phthalo Green. And that was looking a little bit too intense for me, so I just grabbed some white and put a drop of white in there as well. So I think there's maybe 3 drops of green and 1 drop of white in there. And then you see I just pulled some over into the next well and added some more white, and I'm basically trying to make a lighter tint to this because it was way too dark for what I had in mind. And so what I'm going to do with this phthalo green and white that is watered down and whitened tinted, I am putting a border all the way around both of my pages. Basically what I wanted to do was cover up all of the base of the paper that you can see showing through. Now, I'm not going to paint in the center, even though there are some parts of the plain paper that shows through in the center, because I'm pretty sure I'll cover those up as I go along, and they don't look too bad showing. I really love the effect that the watercolor gives you, especially when you add a lot of water, which I did over on the left-hand side. I didn't add quite as much water over on the right-hand side, on the right-hand page, and so I really prefer the look over on the left-hand side because you don't see the brush strokes quite as much. Well, you don't see the brush strokes at all when you use a whole lot of water, because as soon as you put it on your page, all that beautiful watercolor pigment starts to just kind of dance around and do some really beautiful things. And so I kind of wish I had done that on the other side, but it's okay. It's okay the way it is. So now I'm just going to take those pages from the Arbonne catalog, and I'm going to adhere them to my page using some Liquitex matte medium. And I bought a big jug of this time around because I got tired of replacing the little jars of it. So I really love this stuff. It's a glue, but it's also a top coat, and so it's really great on your mixed media projects. What it does is it makes your paper that your collage paper that you're adding to the page, it makes it one with the paper below it. So it you brush it below and then you brush it over top and you make sure that all of the edges are sealed. One thing that I do when I'm using matte medium, because I don't use a whole lot of it, I'm just putting some more over here and crinkling up that tissue paper, because I want to actually, and I didn't quite use enough of it here. I really should have been quite liberal with the matte medium. But what I wanted to do here is have this tissue paper glued to the page so that there were some wrinkles and overlapping places on the tissue paper so that it would have a real interesting texture to it. And so I'm having to go back and add some matte medium on the edges here, and I'm using my art journal page itself as a palette because I'm going to put more tissue paper over there where that matte medium is right now. And so you basically just brush out all of the wrinkles, although in this case I wanted the wrinkles there, so I didn't brush them all out. But normally that's what you would do. So you see, you just use it as a glue and then you just brush it right on top, and any places that look like the paper's lifting or curling up on the edges, you just go back and add a little bit more until it's all sealed in. And this is what I use in place of what I used to use way back when I started was Mod Podge. But in my climate, Mod Podge will never ever dry. It just stays tacky the whole life of the journal. And whereas this, it dries almost instantly. Well, not instantly, but it dries very, very quickly, especially when you use a heat gun. So by the time I'm finished using this heat gun here, this is going to be absolutely dry, like bone dry, not just dry to the touch, but it's going to be very, very dry. And I do like to thoroughly dry my media in between adding my layers, because that way I don't run any risk of messing up my pens that I might use, but also it keeps the colors from fading. Now, one thing that I purposely did was I ran the text paper under the tissue paper. I'm just taking some parchment paper there, and I'm tearing out two pages that I can just lay in between the sheets of the journal so that it can catch any drips or overspray and not mess up the pages below and on the other side. So I felt like I needed to add a little bit more of this phthalo green watercolor, and so I'm just doing that here. And of course this is tinted with white. And you see me reaching up there. That's where I have 2 bottles of water. I keep a clean water, two really full, big, huge jugs of water, and one of them is for clean and one of them is for dirty. So I always clean out my brush in the dirty jar first, and then I give it a final rinse in the clean jar, and then I put it in my brush cleaning bin, which also has water in it. So by the time it gets to the bin, it's definitely clean. Now this is Colorings by Shimmers, and it's called Mandarin Mai Tai is the color, and this came in the Freckled Fawn kit. It's what I love about it is that it doesn't have any shimmer to it. It's just a mist, a color mist. And I often don't like to use anything shimmery on my art journal pages. Went a little overboard. So the nice thing about using some matte medium is that it also kind of seals in the base of your page so that anything that you put on top of it, especially if it's water soluble, you can pull it off pretty easily. And so you saw me just go in there with I don't know if I used a baby wipe or a paper towel, but either would do the trick for just toning down anything that you put on top of already dried matte medium. So here I'm just showing you, I love how watercolor looks when it pools up in those little pools that are really intense. I just love the way it looks. Now I took some Liquitex acrylic ink, and I just want to tone down this whole page, especially the center. And so I just dripped 2 big piles of Liquitex acrylic ink on, like one on each page, and then I just spread it out with my paintbrush. Needed a little bit more just to get to the edges of the page, just to tone that down a little bit. And that's a really nice way of making a page look really brought together. So until I did this step, it really looked like it was obvious how all the layers were put together. And what this step does is it just kind of evens everything out and gives me a nice cohesive base upon which I can work. You'll notice I did turn my journal upside down for some of this, and I do that sometimes just to make sure that I missed the page evenly, because sometimes I neglect the bottom part because I don't want to miss my legs by mistake. So I just turn it around and missed it the other way to get the bottom. So I really like how this base is looking. I took a picture of it there because I liked it so much. I just wanted to capture it. And now what I'm doing right now is I'm actually looking for my stencil. And then I made a giant process video faux pas by turning off my camera while I looked for my stencil. And then I went ahead, found my stencil, and did 2 or 3 steps and completely forgot to turn back on my camera. So you're now, I think, 3 steps ahead. So I used white acrylic paint to stencil in the bow. And I really wish that I had shown you that. It was a really fun process. I used white acrylic ink and a foam brush, and I just dabbed the foam brush and the acrylic ink right over the stencil, and that was really fun. And you can see that added that bow pattern all over it. And then I took the stamp that came in the kit. It was a scalloped edge, a repeating scalloped edge, and so I stamped that all the way around along the bottom and a little bit at the top. And then I took that circular foam stamp and stamped some white acrylic ink mixed with gelato, and the gelato came in the kit as well. I will show that step again at the end because I'm going to do that again. That is the mixing of paint with gelato to get that nice light pink color. And I just used a circle foam stamp that I showed you a few minutes ago while I was talking about something else. Then finally, to get us caught up, I splattered some gold Liquitex ink all over the page just to, again, that kind of ties it together. I think of art journaling and mixed media work as a constant dance between putting on new things and then covering, like, kind of adding definition and interest by adding new things, and then covering up those things with other things so that it becomes less obvious about what's on top, if that makes sense. So when I'm done, I know I'm done when I feel like it's not really obvious where I ended. And that's how I decide when I'm done anyways, because I like it to look all pulled together. So I added some white splatters too, which you saw me do. And now this is a stencil and mask that I created myself from a magazine ad. And I do have a video that shows how I did that. So I'll link it right here in a card and also below. I'm using temporary adhesive to adhere my mask down to the other side. I want the girls to be facing each other, so even though there's a bit of stickiness on the Prada side of that mask, I want to use it facing the other way. So this is a mask that I made from a magazine ad and some MacTac, that clear MacTac paper that you can get at the dollar store. Again, I pulled out my Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus watercolors, and I'm using Quinceañera Cryodone Magenta, and I just took one tiny little drop. And I am using a wet brush, and so that is making the ink a little bit less pigmented. And the one thing that I will warn you when you use a stencil with a really wet substance like watercolor is that you will get some leakage, in some seepage, I guess, which means that the watercolor will seep in underneath of the stencil and you won't really get a perfect edge. But as long as you keep that in mind, you can still get a really beautiful messy look by doing this. So I just needed a little bit more of the magenta here, so I just grabbed some. I'm going to intensify that, and look at how it just kind of moves around on the page when I put it on with quite a bit of water. So here I'm putting it on with less water because I'm going right close to the edges, and I really don't want it to seep too much under the edge of my stencil or my mask. In the center of the girl on the left-hand side, I was nowhere near the edge, so I went ahead and put a lot of water on my brush before I applied it, and I just love how it dances around and does its own thing. It really looks quite beautiful. And I'm going to leave that kind of cloud-like billowy edge that kind of runs along the side of the face on the left-hand girl. I'm going to leave that intact because I really love it when watercolor does that. So I'm going to leave it. I'm just sopping up any little bits that that seeped under the mask, and wow, I really love it. It's so pretty. I'm really taking my time to clean up as I go this time, because one thing that I find really challenging about doing art journaling is that it tends to leave my room in quite a state of disarray, and that makes me never want to do art journaling because I kind of know that it's going to take a while to clean up. So this time I tried to keep on top of it as I went, and that really helped. And it also helped me not lose things, and although I did lose my stencil, I lost a few things. So this is looking a little unbalanced because there's plenty of that green color over on the left-hand side, but not much on the right-hand side. So I'm just adding some more of that phthalo green. I'm glad that I ended up taking a little bit too much of it, because it turns out I just kept my palette handy the whole time. And that palette is the palette that the inks come in, that the watercolor comes in. So before I get working on whatever comes next, which I don't know what it'll be, I just wanted to show you how beautiful these colors and these media work together. You can see how the watercolor wash sticks differently to the different media on the page. So for example, where I had done some stenciling with acrylic ink, it resists that a little bit, and then the pink goes into the little cracks and the little nooks and crannies of the texture in the paint itself. Because I stippled it with that foam brush, the paint itself has some texture, and it just looks gorgeous. I love to play with mixed media, and look at how that looks with the pooled watercolor on it. And where the tissue paper wrinkled, has all this beautiful texture. And you can still see some of the original print that was there. This yellow shows through because it was in acrylic. Lots of texture over here. And despite the leakage, which I was pretty sure would happen, the flower still has a real delicate look to it, and so does her nose. I like this kind of ghost image here that you can see where the stencil originally was, and on this side it's even more delicate. It's really pretty. I like how that turned out. So next I'm going to outline these girls, and I have this mask here just to refer to, but I don't really need it. Oops, I did a little bit of a botch job on her nose there, but that's okay. I am using my Faber-Castell Pitt pen in the brush tip, and that gives me a beautiful bold outline. I use that a lot for bold outlining, both in my art journals and also in my scrapbook pages. And that just does a good job of emphasizing. A part of me didn't want to cover up. I really liked the way that the paint from the stencil just kind of moved into the paint from the background without the outline. And so a part of me didn't want to outline it, but a part of me really did. So that part won. Now I'm using a medium point Faber-Castell Pitt pen for the outlining of the flower. That just gives it a little bit more of a delicate look to it. And now I'm using the Jelly Roll white gel pen that came in the kit. And this is giving me a very, very faint white outline, and it's kind of sketchy because I'm going over it multiple times, and it just gives a little tiny bit of a highlight. It's a very subtle detail, but these kinds of subtle details to me make a big difference on the final product. I'm going to outline this whole thing at the end again with another product, but this just adds a little bit of interest for when you look really closely, you will see it. And then I just went back to those little delicate flowers and I added a couple of dots that would be kind of like the center of the flower. I did it in black first, and now I'm just going back and adding some little white dots amongst the black dots. And that just adds a little detail and makes the flower look a little tiny bit more realistic. And now I'm going into my alphabet stamps, and I'm looking for something that's pretty big and pretty casual and that has a question mark. But the font that I really want is this Inka Dinka Doo stamp, but these are both Inka Dinka Doos. But I want to use that uppercase chunky one, but it doesn't have a question mark. But this other one has a question mark, so I'm just going to use the question mark from the other one. I'm spelling out the word vinyl here. And normally I stamp one at a time, but I'm going to change my mind and just pick up all of these stamps with my ink block. Just because it was looking pretty good there, so I just decided to go ahead and pick them all up at once. It saves me a little bit of time. There you go. And the question mark didn't quite stamp properly, so I just had to go back. I just took the stamp itself. You don't really need a block, and I often don't use blocks when I'm stamping on my art journal pages. Now I'm just going in and I'm adding a little bit of detail to these letters using, again, my white Jelly Roll pen that came in the Freckled Fawn Mixed Media Kit. The Mixed Media Kit comes with so many fun little things to play with. The gelato, the mist, the texture paste, which I don't even use on this project, and this gel pen is my very favorite. I have a couple of these in my stash. And now that that's all outlined, I've decided to give it a black and white stripy look by just going through with my gel pen and making these little stripes. I'm going to make the eye be a diagonal stripe, but all of the other lines are going to be horizontal stripe. And this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm striping letters, is have only one be different from the others. Just for, I like my art journal pages to have a bit of a whimsical, unpredictable, wonky look, and that helps with that, just to have these little details every once in a while that are unexpected. It's either that or make the lines go all different directions, which I would run out of directions, I think. And I just decided in this case, I do sometimes make them all go different directions, but in this case I decided to just make one of them different. So I like that effect, and I really like how it looks like the whole thing is outlined in black, when really it's not outlined in black. It's just that the stamp was there to begin with. I'm going to outline all of these stamps, which I stamped with StazOn ink, and I do use StazOn ink as my main black ink when I'm stamping on art journal pages, because you don't have to worry about, because it's waterproof, you don't have to worry about it running or causing you any troubles if it hits water. So the reason I'm outlining all of these scallops, even though you can barely see it, is that it just ever so slightly lightens up this repeating stamp, which has a lot of weight to it. And so I just want to lighten it up a little bit, and outlining does that. You'll notice that I also, those stamps that the foam stamps that I didn't show because I turned my camera off by accident, I stamped those over top of this repeating scallop pattern as well. Just again, that was another way of toning it down. And so if you ever add something to your page and then immediately go, that was too much, just layer some other stuff over it, and it will make it look a lot more like it belongs. So now I'm grabbing my Liquitex acrylic paint and in the tubes, and I'm just putting the stencil back in place because that's going to mask some of the painting that I'm going to do. Basically, I want the painting to only land inside of the stencil, so that's why I'm using the stencil. In this case, I'm using the stencil kind of as a mask. So I'm grabbing my gelato that came in the Freckled Fawn kit. It is called Passion Fruit is the color. And I am making a big bunch of pigment. I'm just putting a little Valentine's message to my viewers in there. And I'm just not scraping, but I'm basically scribbling out a big patch of pigment onto my palette. And I'm adding the white paint and I'm just spreading it around into a thin layer. And this becomes almost like a stamp pad for my foam stamp. So this is exactly the same thing that I did with that circle foam stamp that I didn't show the process for. I just picked up bits of the paint that is mixed with gelato and stamped it every here and there on my project. I really love using gelatos to add pigment to white paint. It means that you don't need to have a whole ton of different colors of paint because I always have lots and lots of white paint on hand, and you can always color it with gelatos or even with mists or inks or with anything that you have. But I especially like using gelatos. So I'm basically making this pattern be a background behind the girl on the right-hand page. And then I'm just using it as accents inside of the girl on the left-hand page. So these two pages are quite reversed from one another. That's sort of the theme that I'm going with. Now I'm going to use my Pilot multi-ball pen, and this is a pen that a YouTube viewer sent me quite some time ago. It was several years ago now, that I like to use on mixed media because it's a really fine ballpoint pen, but it works really, really well over almost everything that I've ever tried to write on. So I just added a little bit of detail on her head. I added a scallop, and then I put a little dot in the center of each of the scallops, and then I added some hash marks on the other girl's head. And I'm really just kind of playing around and doodling. And I don't really have a plan, but I know that I don't want the two girls to be exactly the same or exactly opposite each other either. And so I'm just being mindful of that. I went back with the Faber-Castell Pitt pen there just to make those hash lines a little bit more dark. And now here's something I'm going to regret. I don't regret taking these out and playing with them, but I don't really like what I did with them. So they are called Ecoline brush pens, and I have them up in my bedroom most of the time because I use them for doodling and practicing brush script and that sort of thing, brush lettering. And I'm just scribbling every here and there with them. And the reason I regret it, and also adding some dots over here, first of all, I'm glad I used them because that's the only way that you can learn what works and doesn't work is by using it. So that's good. I'm not really fond of the marker dotted look. It just, I don't love it. But the important lesson that I learned here is that these are water soluble, which means that when I add water to anything or anything liquid on top of them, they're going to smear, which can be good if you want to smear them, but I didn't want to smear them. So I ended up with some smears on my page that I didn't really want. But this is my main way of learning. And I will remember that now because I made the mistake much more than I would if I had just been told that or read it or watched it online. I'm going to do some typing now. So I have my vintage typewriter out, and I will cut this part out so my video won't be so long. What I did was I typed some pro and con phrases and ideas randomly onto a piece of notebook paper, and I wanted to use this kind of paper because it's thin and I liked the lines, and it kind of looks a little bit retro, like back in the day when you had notebooks at school, which is, I know that they still use this paper these days, but it does remind me of my childhood, and I'm scrapbooking about the idea of records. And so I wrote some pros and cons, and then I'm just cutting them up. I laid out all the pros on the girl on the left and all the cons on the girl on the right, and now I just have a piece of packaging that I'm using as a palette to hold my matte medium from Liquitex, and I am painting these on. I'm painting below them and then sticking them in and then painting on top of them. And some of them are going on crooked, but that is a-okay. It's a little bit tricky to collage something on top of bumpy, wrinkly paper. And so when I get down to the bumpy parts, it's going to be a little bit harder. I'm putting this love right on her heart. I often, when I have a person on an art journal page, I will often put an X around their heart. It's kind of like a cross my heart type of, it's just my own personal little thing that I like to do. And so this girl has an X where her heart would be. And I put love on the heart as well by the X. And so I just thought that the word love kind of just belonged on your heart. And so this matte medium does a really great job of collaging these little pieces of paper in place. And I really love how thin this paper is and that you can see through it a little bit. It's not 100% opaque. I will just keep on doing the same thing here. I dried it really, really well, which is a step that you didn't see, but I'm pointing out because it's so important. Because now I'm just checking to make sure that it's dry, because it's really important that before you doodle with a ballpoint pen, if you ever want to use that pen again, it's very important that the thing that you're doodling on is 100% dry. And so I am just going to outline with that Pilot multi-ball pen again, and I'm going to outline all of the little typewritten phrases. So I'll let you see a tiny bit of that process, but it is pretty repetitive, so I will cut most of it out. So the outline brings emphasis to the written parts, the little typewritten strips, but it also helps integrate them and make them look like they belong because there's doodling on other parts of the page. I'm just taking more of that quinacridone magenta and some white Hydrus by Dr. P.H. Martins, and I'm adding some pink around all of the strips. And the reason I'm doing that is to try to integrate them. Remember, I said it towards the beginning that it's this dance between putting on new things and then covering them up, and then putting on new things and then covering them up. And right now, those strips look very much like they were the last thing added. So I find that even though I'm not painting over the strips, just painting around the strips, what it does, and I'm using green on the other side, and again, I already have that mixed from before because I took too much. And I don't want to put too much green on her face because I want the yellow to remain, but I am kind of pushing the paint all the way around the edges. And what that does is, because even though I'm not painting over those strips, the paint is accumulating in all of the little nooks and crannies around the strips and just making them look more integrated into the page. And I really love how when you add really wet watercolor, how it moves around on the page. I think I've mentioned that a lot today, but I just really love that process, especially down here. I love how these colors are blending into this beautiful purple color. It goes from purple to blue to green. It's just so pretty. That little bottom part of the right-hand girl is probably my very favorite part of the whole page. I just love how those colors blended together and how the acrylic paint That's the little circles that were made with the foam stamp that you guys didn't see. I love how those acrylic paint circles hold that watercolor just so beautifully. I just love the beauty of layered pieces. And now I'm actually using my dryer to blow my heat tool to just blow that ink around to the places that I want it to be. It was kind of coming out of the outline a little bit, so I just blew it in place. So now I just am grabbing my drawer full of rub-ons, and I have some left over here. These white ones, there's just a handful of them left on this sheet. So I'm just going to put them on this girl pretty randomly. And these are basic gray rub-ons. They're ages old. I mean, they're probably from 2009 or 2010, and yet they still work. I wouldn't count on rub-ons working for that long, but those basic gray ones are pretty darn good. I thought about adding these Amy Tan ones because they're just so doodly, but I decided to go with these Maggie Holmes ones instead because they had the color scheme that I was really looking for. Change the camera angle here so that you could see this a little bit better. These rub-ons are only about a year old or so, and I found that I'm just applying two phrases here. You might not be able to see the second phrase. They're just I'm applying them together as one. These rub-ons were famous for not working when they came out. These are the Maggie Holmes. I forget the collection. It might be the Bloom collection. And look at this beautiful rose. It's so pretty. I'm going to have a bit of trouble with one of the leaves coming off, and I had to be a little patient with it. Sorry that my hand is in the way, but the gold rub-ons in this collection particularly are known for not doing well, for giving you a bit of a hard time, and sometimes not working at all. So I love how that looks right there in the corner. And now I'm just going to put this heart over her heart again. I like these themes to kind of come through on my page. And I'm just going to continue to put rub-ons every here and there all over the page. It is really, really tricky to put rub-ons over textured paper, which is what I'm doing right here. And so be very patient with it if you try to do this. And I will show you how you can use a little bit of matte medium to help glue down some of the little bits of rub-ons that sometimes they're just not sticky. You can get them off the transfer sheet, but they won't actually stick to your page. So I'll show you what to do if that happens. So you can touch it up with a pen, but you can also just take I'm just going to grab my, and I'm covering it up. There, I just grabbed my paintbrush that had matte medium on it, and I just used it to stick down the little bit of the S that was giving me a hard time. So I added rub-ons all over the place, and then I'm just taking my matte medium. Again, I'm just using that packaging as a palette, and I'm just pulling back the little pieces that are not sticking and adding some matte medium under them. But then I'm also adding matte medium over top of all of the rub-ons because I'm not confident that they will stay on the page over time. But if they have a layer of matte medium over them, then I'm pretty sure they will. So I'm adding, first of all, I did dry it really, really well, and then I'm taking my Pilot pen again, and I am adding little bits of doodling every here and there, and those are very, very fine black doodles, and I'm mostly just outlining every here and there and touching up things. And I'm also going to use my white jelly roller that came in the Freckled Fawn kit. There I go, outlining those hearts. And now I'm going to add my journaling. And so I'm journaling in a fine point Faber-Castell Pitt pen and just deciding where. I think right over these not butterflies, these bows from the Freckled Fawn stencil that I used off screen. My journaling says, every time I see or hear about someone who plays records, I'm tempted to buy a turntable. A part of me wants to get one, ... But another part, and this is continued on the other page, but another part of me says it's a phase and I won't actually end up listening to records. And here's comes the second part right there. And now I'm just going to underline all of it. And we're almost done. I'm just at this point, what I'm thinking about is what are some of the final touches that I need to add to make this page look like it is kind of all brought together and like nothing is on top. So one of my favorite ways to do that is to add some splatters of mist. So I'm taking my Liquitex acrylic gold ink and I am just really laying it all over the place, like just flicking it like crazy all over. Then I have put some golden fluid acrylic ink in my fine liner applicators. I have the 20 gauge fine tip that you buy at Simon Says Stamp in a 2-pack. I have a whole bunch of those and I'm going to be putting them in paint. I bought them thinking I might put some glue in them too. I bought a whole bunch, but I love this so much. You saw me just do a test there on the parchment paper that I had used just to make sure that it was flowing well and that I had good control of it. Oh, this is my very favorite thing ever. So long, paint pens. I'm done with you. This is my dream come true. So thank you so much to Stephanie Hart who suggested this. She's of course the cat lady who draws and paints those beautiful cat mixed media pieces. I will link her information in the description below, but I just went over this with that to give it a bit more of a wonky, messy look. And I also put white golden acrylic fluid ink in the, not ink, it's mist, gold. No, it's not even mist. It's paint. My goodness. It is golden fluid acrylic paint, and it is in a fine liner container, and I absolutely love it. And adding the white just lightens the whole thing up a little bit and gives it just a very finished look. Adds that highlight all the way around the edges of my little silhouette girls. I love silhouettes. Silhouettes are one of my favorite things. They're great for people who aren't good drawers like me, because you don't have to feel any pressure to draw a face or eyes or anything like that. Now, I loved how this looked so much that I decided to do a bit of fine lining along the edges here, just some mark making to fill in the space and to brighten up, particularly over on the right-hand side because there was so much darkness going on over there. So the white paint really adds to that. And I couldn't resist putting a couple of scribbles every here and there, and yeah, I wanted to keep on scribbling, but I decided to refrain. So I did go back and I added a little bit of detail work, and this is really great to work with because I wasn't sure. I knew I had seen Stephanie scribbling really fast with it, but I wasn't sure how good this bottle would be for lining things with more precision and going slow, but this was me going slow. Now it is sped up 4 times, so it doesn't seem like I was going slow, but I actually was going quite slow, and it did a wonderful job of filling in the details of those flowers, and it just helped the flowers to stand out. And here I am, I got a little bit, I squirted a little bit too much at the beginning of that first heart, so it's a little bit thicker than I wanted, but you see how it just really adds emphasis to the items that I am outlining with it. I really love the fine liner bottles. So that's it. I am done. I had so much fun with this page. I am going to show you the yummy details of this. Every time I art journal, I always feel like, why don't I art journal more often? Because I really love it. And then I look at the clock and realize 4 hours have gone by and I still have to make a process video out of this. So maybe that's why I don't art journal as often. I often don't, I can do a scrapbooking page usually in about 2 hours, but here, this took me a good 4 hours to do. There's a lot of drying and waiting and kind of, going back and forth between things. That's what makes it really fun, but it does take a chunk of time. So there's a blizzard outside today and we're not going anywhere anyways, so I got up early this morning so I could get a head start on this project. You see the smeared ink there? That's from that marker that I said I shouldn't have used, but I guess I'm kind of glad I did. I really love the detail. I love how you can see that Freckled Fawn stencil, the bows in the background every here and there. And this is the page that I don't like as much. You can see more of the brush strokes. I really didn't use enough water on this page, and it really shows. It shows in a couple of different ways. It looks kind of smeary, and you can see brush strokes, and also the color is a lot more dark over here. And so I think that, you know, I'll just kind of file that away in the back of my mind for the next time I'm working with those Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus inks. Not inks, they're watercolor, I guess. They're really, really beautiful, but I think it's easy to forget just how pigmented they are, and adding lots and lots of water helps them not only move, which is what they're supposed to do on your page, but it also keeps them from being quite so intense. Like this page is quite intense in places, but I do very much enjoy color, so it works for me. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you're looking for the Freckled Fawn Mixed Media Kit, which I used in different places on this spread, make sure that you check out my affiliate link below if you're interested in purchasing that kit. And take care and have a really great scrappy week.